Amelia pressed her knee into the dirt and got the angle right before she drove the stake. The lavender border needed to sit 12 inches back from the Hendersons' front walk, or the whole sightline would collapse when it bloomed. She'd learned that the hard way 2 houses down, 3 summers ago, and she wasn't going to let Eleanor Henderson make the same mistake just because Eleanor thought closer was better. Closer was never better with lavender. Amelia knew this the way she knew her own name. "You don't have to do that," Eleanor said from the porch steps. She had a glass of lemonade in each hand, and the expression of someone who'd been told not to feel guilty and was failing at it. "I know I don't." Amelia sat back on her heels and accepted the lemonade. "That's why it counts." Eleanor laughed. It was the kind of laugh that meant something had been settled. The street was Dunmore Place, 14 houses on a gentle curve in a suburb 40 minutes outside of Columbus. It didn't look like much from a car: modest colonials, older oaks, the occasional basketball hoop listing slightly to one side. But you could tell something was different the moment you slowed down. The front gardens were extraordinary. Not expensive extraordinary, not the kind that suggested a landscaping company with a quarterly contract, but the other kind. The kind with intention behind every choice, where the plants seemed to have been placed by someone who understood what each house was actually trying to say. Because they had been. Amelia had designed 8 of the 14 gardens on that block, and she'd charged exactly nothing for any of them. She'd started with the Kowalskis when their front yard was mostly mud, and a for sale sign they'd just pulled down, newly moved in and overwhelmed. She'd knocked on their door with a sketch on graph paper and a 6-pack, and by the end of the evening, they'd agreed on a low-maintenance native plant garden that would look good by year 2 and magnificent by year 5. She'd done the same for the Pattersons, the Abernathys, the new couple at the end, the Nguyens, whose baby was still in the hospital when they closed on the house, and who had not needed to think about landscaping at all, but found themselves with a completed front bed of ornamental grasses and black-eyed Susans by the time they brought the baby home. Amelia had done that alone, mostly in the early mornings before her actual work started. She left a note that just said, "Welcome to Dunmore Place," and didn't sign it, though everyone knew. Her actual work was what paid the mortgage: a firm in the city, commercial contracts, corporate campuses, and hospital courtyards, and the occasional city park redesign that showed up in local news and made Tyler straighten up a little with pride at dinner. She was good at her job, in a way that had taken years of being merely very good, and the clients who'd worked with her once tended to request her specifically the second time. She billed at a rate that had made her genuinely embarrassed to quote it the first few times she'd quoted it, and now didn't. The money was real. So was the work. She'd interned for 3 years at a firm that used her ideas and promoted other people, and she'd done it without complaining because she was learning things she couldn't learn anywhere else. And she understood that about herself, that she needed to be in the work before she could lead anything. She'd started her own freelance practice out of the second bedroom of the apartment she and Tyler had rented before the house, taking calls while sitting on the floor, because they hadn't bought a desk yet, billing in amounts that barely covered the software. She'd built the client list, name by name. None of it was handed to her, and she had the specific quality, rare in people who'd worked as hard as she had, of not needing anyone to know that. The block party was hers, too. 12 years of it. She'd started it because she'd wanted to meet the neighbors after she and Tyler moved in, and the block had no existing tradition of that kind, and so she'd created one. The first year, it was 20 people in the Landry's driveway. By the 5th year, it had expanded to a full street closure, a permit, a chili competition with a traveling trophy, and a talent show that had somehow become the thing everyone looked forward to most. She organized the permit application every August, coordinated the food assignments, sourced the tables and folding chairs through the church, 2 streets over, arranged for the parking exemptions, and managed the email chain that otherwise would have devolved into chaos by week 3. The neighborhood watch was also hers. She'd gotten it registered with the city after a car break-in the previous winter, set up the alert system, maintained the contact list. Nothing about any of this was glamorous. She did it because the street functioned better when someone did it, and she was the someone who'd shown up. Tyler appeared in the Hendersons' driveway at 6:15, tie loosened, jacket over one arm. He'd come from the branch. He was regional manager now for a mid-sized bank with 9 locations across central Ohio, a job he'd grown into with the same steady, unhurried confidence he applied to most things. People on the block trusted him, really trusted him, which was different from merely liking him. Dave Kowalski had called Tyler before he'd called his own brother when the Kowalski family business hit a problem with its line of credit. The Nguyens had asked him to review their first mortgage before they signed anything. Eleanor Henderson's mother had sat at Tyler and Amelia's kitchen table the previous spring and let Tyler walk her through her retirement accounts for 2 hours over coffee, and had walked out with a plan and had called the following week to say her actual financial advisor hadn't explained it as clearly in 15 years. Tyler was the kind of man people found reassuring. He was tall without being imposing, steady in the way that some men are steady. Not because they've suppressed something, but because they're actually that calm underneath. He had a good handshake, which sounds like a small thing, but Amelia had watched him meet hundreds of people over 17 years, and she'd never seen him give a bad one. He meant it every time. That was something you couldn't fake past a certain point. "Still working?" he said. "Almost done." She drove the last stake and stood, brushing her hands on her jeans. "You eat?" "I grabbed something." He picked up her trowel from the ground and turned it over in his hand once, looking at the bed she'd laid out. "This going to be the lavender thing?" "Border, yeah." "Going to smell incredible?" "That's the idea." Eleanor had gone inside. The street was quiet in the way that June streets are quiet, not empty, just settled, the day's activity folding itself down. A sprinkler was running 2 houses east. Someone's dog was inside somewhere, not barking, but wanting to. Amelia gathered her tools into the canvas bag she carried for street work, and Tyler waited without being asked to, the way he always did, the jacket still over his arm. They walked home together along the sidewalk, past the Abernathy's salvia border and then Guyon's black-eyed Susans, through the small world she had spent 12 years quietly building. Their porch light was on. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the kitchen smelled like the morning's coffee, which she hadn't had time to finish. The mail was on the counter. 2 glasses were on the drying rack from breakfast. Tyler hung his jacket on the hook by the stairs and went to the sink and washed his hands, and Amelia set her bag down and pulled the band from her hair, and for 30 seconds, neither of them said anything, which was fine, because after 17 years, silence between them was just another form of comfortable. She poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. Everything in the room was exactly where it was supposed to be. Tyler set his keys on the counter and opened the refrigerator before he'd even taken off his jacket. "Long day," Amelia said. "Yeah." He pulled out a beer, twisted the cap, and drank standing at the open fridge door. She washed her hands at the kitchen sink, watching the lavender-tinged soil spiral down the drain. Her knees were stiff from kneeling on Eleanor's front walk for 2 hours. She dried her hands on the dish towel hanging from the oven handle and noticed the 2 breakfast glasses were gone from the drying rack. She'd left them there that morning. She remembered it specifically, the way she always left them to air dry before putting them away in the evening. Now the rack was empty, and the glasses were back in the cabinet. She could see them through the open cabinet door Tyler hadn't fully closed. "Did you put the glasses away?" she asked. Tyler closed the refrigerator. "What?" The breakfast glasses from the rack. He looked at the rack, then at the cabinet. Must have. I don't know. I wasn't paying attention. Amelia closed the cabinet the rest of the way. She turned to tell him about Eleanor's lavender border, about the 12-inch rule, and how Eleanor had hovered with lemonade the whole time, nervous and grateful in that particular way people got when they owed her something they couldn't pay back. But Tyler was already walking out of the kitchen with his beer, his jacket still on, his phone in his hand. She heard him go upstairs. The bedroom door didn't close, just drifted to without clicking. Amelia stood at the counter and sorted through the mail. A water bill, a furniture catalog, a reminder from the dentist addressed to Tyler. She set his mail in his pile, hers in hers, a system they'd kept without ever discussing it, like most of their systems. Outside, Mrs. Kowalski's sprinklers came on across the street. Amelia had specified that placement herself, the head set at 45 degrees to keep the water off the salvia. She pulled chicken from the refrigerator and found the cutting board. Upstairs, she could hear Tyler's footsteps cross the bedroom. Stop, then the bathroom door. She quartered the chicken and tried to remember whether he'd seemed tired or just quiet. Those were different things with Tyler. Tired meant he'd talk through dinner, processing the day in his slow, methodical way. Low numbers, staffing problems at the Westerville branch, whatever the regional director had said on the call. Quiet meant he'd sit with his phone, and she wouldn't press, because she'd learned, a long time ago, that pressing made it worse. Tonight felt like quiet. The shower ran for 11 minutes. Amelia knew this without watching the clock. She'd cooked in this kitchen long enough that the sounds of the house were a second language to her. Shower on, the pipes knocking once behind the wall. The fan pulling air through the vent above the stove. Tyler came downstairs in clean clothes, his hair still damp, the beer finished. "Smells good," he said. 40 minutes, she said. He sat at the kitchen island and set his phone face down on the granite. That was new. He'd always left it face up. Always. She'd teased him about it once, about being attached, and he'd laughed and said it was a work thing. He had to be reachable. Now it lay face down, and he folded his hands on top of the counter like a man waiting to be called on. "How's Eleanor's garden coming?" he asked. "Good. The lavender's in. She was watching me the whole time like she was afraid I'd charge her at the end." Tyler smiled. It reached his eyes, which meant something, or meant nothing. After 17 years, Amelia had stopped using his smile as a measuring instrument. "Kristen's porch light is out," he said. "The fixture on the left." Amelia didn't look up from the pan. "I'll text her." "I already mentioned it to her." The oil popped once. Loud. Amelia turned the heat down a quarter and kept her eyes on the chicken. "When?" she asked. "This afternoon. She was pulling in when I got home." Amelia nodded. That was ordinary. Kristen was always pulling in or pulling out, always in motion, the way single women with children and second jobs tended to be. Amelia had watched her navigate the year after the divorce with something close to admiration. The refinancing had been Tyler's idea. He'd brought it up at the block party 2 summers ago, mentioned he could run numbers for her, and 3 weeks later, Kristen had been sitting at this same kitchen island with a coffee and a folder of documents. Amelia had made the coffee. She plated the chicken and carried both plates to the table. Tyler picked up his phone before he stood. Amelia didn't sit right away. She went back to the counter for her water glass and paused at the kitchen window that looked out toward the side yard and, past it, the narrow gap between their house and Kristen's. Kristen's porch light was out, the left one, just like Tyler said. The right one threw a yellow half-circle across the steps. Tyler knew which one. Amelia picked up her water glass and brought it to the table and sat down. She told herself it meant nothing. He'd pulled in at 6:15, same as always. Kristen had been in the driveway. He'd noticed a porch light. That was the kind of neighbor Tyler was: steady, observant, helpful. The block trusted him for exactly those reasons. She'd always been proud of that. She picked up her fork. Across the table, Tyler cut into his chicken and asked about the block party planning, whether she'd submitted the street closure permit yet, whether the Nguyens were doing the chili again this year. She answered him. Her voice was level and her hands were still. Under the table, her phone lit up. A text from an unknown number, brief, no name. It sat there face up on her thigh, glowing for 4 seconds, and went dark. She left it. The text from the unknown number was still unread on her phone when Amelia cleared the dinner plates. Tyler had gone back upstairs. She could hear the television, the low murmur of a baseball game. Nothing loud, just enough to fill the room. She ran hot water over the plates and stacked them in the rack. The 2 glasses from that morning were back in the cabinet where Tyler had put them. She looked at the cabinet for a moment, then dried her hands. She picked up her phone. The text was from a 614 number she didn't recognize. No name, just, "Can you call me when you get a chance? It's Dave. New phone. Dave Sutter, the house on the other side of theirs." Retired electrician, 63, who grew tomatoes along his back fence every summer and always brought some over without being asked. Amelia had helped him plan a shade garden 2 years ago after the oak came down in the storm. They waved to each other most mornings. She stepped out the back door onto the patio and called him. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey," he said. "Thanks for calling back." "Everything okay?" A pause. Not long, but the kind that carries weight. "Yeah, look, I've been sitting on something and I don't feel right about it anymore. I don't know how to do this." Amelia stood very still on the patio. The evening was warm. Somewhere down the block, a sprinkler was running. "Just say it," she said. Dave exhaled. "I've seen Tyler going into Kristen's back door. At night. Not once. I've seen it maybe 6, 7 times in the last 2 months. Sometimes pretty late. He stays a while and comes back." The sprinkler ran. A car passed on the far end of Dunmore Place. "He goes in the back?" she said. "Yeah, I'm up late sometimes, my hip. I see lights, I look out. I wasn't spying. I couldn't keep looking at you and not say anything." "How late?" 10, 11, couple times after midnight. Amelia said, "Okay, Amelia, I hear you, Dave. Thank you." She ended the call. She stood on the patio for a while with the phone in her hand. The screen went dark. She didn't move to turn it back on. Then she went inside, climbed the stairs, and walked into the bedroom. Tyler was on his side of the bed, propped against the headboard with his phone. The baseball game was on low. He looked up when she came in. "Coming to bed?" he said. "Not yet. I forgot my pruning shears at Eleanor's." She didn't wait for a response. She walked back downstairs, out the front door, and down the block to Eleanor's house. The pruning shears were exactly where she'd left them, beside the lavender border. She picked them up. She stood on Eleanor's front walk for a moment and looked at the row she'd planted, straight, correctly spaced, 12 inches back from the edge. Then she walked back. She did not go inside immediately. She went around to the side of the house, into the narrow corridor between her house and Kristen's fence. She stood there in the dark with the pruning shears at her side. Kristen's back porch light was out. Tyler had mentioned it at dinner. Kristen's left porch light is out, I told her this afternoon. And now Amelia stood in the dark next to the fence and understood the specific way that information had been delivered. The easy casualness of it, the way he'd brought up Kristen's house before she could. She looked at her own phone. She opened her photo app and went to the shared family album she and Tyler had set up years ago, before shared albums meant anything complicated. It was mostly block party photos, Christmas mornings, the occasional shot of something one of them wanted to show the other, a funny sign, a dog they saw somewhere, a plant she wanted his opinion on. She scrolled back 6 weeks. then 7. She almost missed it. A photo Tyler had uploaded on a Tuesday in May, a restaurant table, 2 glasses of wine, someone's hand resting on the white tablecloth. The hand had a thin silver ring on the index finger. Amelia knew that ring. She'd seen it at a block party, across a kitchen island, on a woman sitting in Amelia's chair, drinking coffee that Amelia had made. Tyler must have uploaded it by accident, or maybe he hadn't looked carefully at what the app was syncing. Either way, it was there. His hand, unmistakable because of the watch she'd given him for their 10th anniversary, and Kristen's hand resting on top of it. Not overlapping, resting, the full weight of it. The way you rest your hand on someone's when you've done it before and you know they'll let you. His thumb turned inward, pressing against hers. Not a moment of contact, a position, the kind of position 2 people settle into without thinking about it because it has already become familiar. Amelia stood in her backyard and looked at the photograph for a long time. She thought about the kitchen island, the coffee she had made. The document spread out, Kristen's refinancing situation, Tyler explaining things in the patient voice he used when he wanted someone to trust him. He's good at this, Amelia had thought that afternoon, watching from across the kitchen. He makes people feel safe. She put the phone back in her pocket. She set the pruning shears on the back porch step, went inside and washed her hands in the kitchen sink. Upstairs, the television was still on. She could hear Tyler's breathing change in the way it did when he was starting to fall asleep, that slight shift in the rhythm of sound from the room above her head. She opened the cabinet and took out a glass, filled it with water from the tap, and drank it, standing at the sink, set it down. The house was exactly as it always was at this hour. The mail was sorted. The dishes were clean. 17 years of evenings had looked more or less like this one. The sound of Tyler upstairs, the kitchen settling around her, the familiar weight of the end of a day. She had built most of what was on this street with her own hands, or close to it. She had measured borders and calculated drainage, and chosen plants for their persistence. She knew which ones came back harder after a bad winter. She turned off the kitchen light. She stood in the dark for a moment before she went upstairs. By the time she reached the bedroom, she knew what she was going to do. Not the specifics, not the sequence, but the fact of it. The decision had arrived the way certainty does, without announcement, without wait, already fully formed. She got into bed. Tyler's breathing was slow, and even beside her, she lay on her back and looked at the ceiling and did not move for a very long time. Amelia woke at 5 and lay still for a long time, watching the gray light come up on the ceiling. Tyler breathed beside her, slow and even, a man with nothing on his conscience. She studied the shape of his shoulder under the sheet and did not touch it. She got up, made coffee, and stood at the window over the sink. Kristen's house sat quiet on the other side of the fence, the back porch light still dark. The kitchen smelled like every other morning of the last 17 years. Amelia drank her coffee and made her decision somewhere in the space between the first sip and the last, without words, the way she decided where a path should curve. She would not scream. She would not throw the photograph in his face and watch him assemble an explanation out of the air. He was good at that. He had spent 2 months being good at it, and she had believed every ordinary thing he said because she had no reason not to. If she confronted him, she would be handing him the one thing he was best at, a chance to talk. So she would not give him words. She would give him silence, and she would let the people who loved her hear the truth from her own mouth, one at a time, in the order that mattered. She rinsed her cup and set it on the drying rack, and the smallness of the gesture nearly undid her. 2 glasses, every morning, for 17 years. She had built a whole street out of that kind of smallness. The lavender at Eleanor's, the chili trophy in the Pattersons' den, the watch email she sent at 11 at night so nobody else had to. She had threaded herself through every house on Dunmore Place, and Tyler had walked that street beside her like a man who belonged to it, and the whole time he had been letting himself in a back door, 40 feet from where she slept. She dried her hands and went to wake him for work. She kissed his cheek the way she always did. He said he loved her the way he always did, and she said it back, and her voice did not shake. The hardest part was not Tyler. The hardest part was Marion. Marion Sutter was Dave's wife, 61, a retired schoolteacher who had run the bake table at the block party for 12 years and who loved Amelia like a daughter. When Amelia's own mother died, Marion had shown up with a casserole and stayed 4 hours and never once filled the silence with anything Amelia didn't need. Marion was the door. Amelia knew that. The Wives Network on Dunmore Place ran through Marion's kitchen the way water runs downhill, and whatever Marion knew by Friday, the street knew by Sunday. To use that, Amelia would have to sit in Marion's kitchen and turn a woman who loved her into an instrument. She would have to take the ugliest thing in her life and set it down on Marion's clean table and watch it change Marion's face. She would have to make her grief useful. She sat in her car outside the Sutter house for 10 minutes before she could go in. She thought about all the years she had given the street, freely, asking nothing, and how this was the first time she had ever come to anyone with her hand out. She thought about the casserole. She thought about how easy it would have been to do nothing, to keep the morning glasses on the rack and the lavender 12 inches back and let the whole pretty machine of her life keep running over the thing buried under it. Then she went in. Marion poured coffee without asking and sat down across from her, and Amelia told her. She did not perform it. She said what Dave had seen, and she said what was in the photograph, and she took out her phone and showed Marion the 2 hands on the white tablecloth, the silver ring, the anniversary watch, the thumbs touching. Marion looked at it for a long time. She set the phone down very carefully, the way you set down something that might break, and she reached across the table and put her hand over Amelia's, and she did not say, "I'm sorry." She said, "What do you need?" "Nothing," Amelia said. "I'm not asking you to do anything. I just didn't want you hearing it from anyone but me." Marion understood exactly what that was. They both did. Amelia stood and Marion stood, and they held each other in the kitchen for a moment, and that was all. Amelia did not have to ask Marion to carry it. She had only to let Marion know it was hers to carry now. The street felt it before it knew anything. Amelia simply stopped. There was no announcement. The block party permit sat unrenewed on her desk, the city's window closing day by day. The neighborhood watch emails, which had gone out every Sunday night at 11 for a year and a half, did not go out. Eleanor's lavender border was finished, but the consultation Amelia had promised the new family at number 9 never got scheduled, and when the Nguyen's texted about their drainage problem, Amelia answered 2 days late with a name and number for a paid landscaper. The vacuum had a shape. People could not name it, but they walked outside, and the street was a little less held than it had been, like a room where someone has turned a thermostat down 2 degrees. The Pattersons wondered aloud whether the party was happening this year. Somebody mentioned that Amelia had seemed quiet. Nobody connected it to anything, because there was nothing yet to connect it to. But Marion's kitchen had a door, and the door was open now, and the thing Amelia had set on the table began, quietly, to move. Tyler noticed before he understood. It started with Glenn Patterson. Tyler had managed Glenn's home equity line 3 years back, and Glenn had clapped him on the shoulder at every party since and called him the only honest man in banking. On Saturday, Tyler raised a hand to Glenn across 2 driveways, the easy half-wave of a man who owned his place on a street, and Glenn looked at him and looked away and bent to coil his hose. Tyler stood in his driveway with his hand still up. He told himself Glenn hadn't seen him. He went inside and didn't mention it. On Sunday, the Abernathys had people over for a cookout, the way they did most warm Sundays, and Tyler heard the laughter over the fence around 4, and he kept waiting for the text that always came, "Come on over, bring beer," and it didn't come. He checked his phone twice. He'd been to a dozen of those cookouts. He stood at the kitchen window and watched the smoke rise off the Abernathys' grill and counted the cars and recognized every one of them. And at 6, he opened a beer and drank it alone in his own kitchen. And the thing he felt did not have a name yet either. The air had changed temperature around him, and he could not find the source. He texted Glenn that night. "We still on for golf Thursday?" He watched it deliver. He watched it sit. The little word "delivered" hung there under his message all evening and did not become read. And Tyler, who had spent his whole life being the man people called back, set his phone face down on the nightstand and lay in the dark next to his wife and listened to her breathe, slow and even, a woman with nothing on her conscience. "You're quiet," he said into the dark. "I'm tired," Amelia said. It was the truest thing she'd said to him in 2 months, and he had no idea. It almost broke on a Tuesday, and it almost broke through Carol. Carol was Tyler's older sister, and Carol adored him. She lived in Westerville, 20 minutes north, and she was the kind of woman who organized the family, who hosted the holidays, who had decided long ago that her little brother was a good man and was not in the habit of revising her decisions. Amelia had always liked Carol. That was the problem, because Tyler, feeling the floor tilt under him and not yet knowing why, did the thing cornered men do. He went to his sister. He drove up to Westerville on Tuesday evening and sat in Carol's living room and told her, Amelia learned this later, in pieces, that Amelia had been acting strange, distant, that she'd stopped doing the thing she loved, that he was worried about her. Maybe it was depression, maybe it was something with her mother's death resurfacing, and that he was trying to be patient. But it was hard, and he didn't know what he'd done. He told it well. He always told things well. And Carol, who loved him, listened to her brother describe himself as a worried husband standing by a wife who was falling apart. And she believed him because that was the version she already had on the shelf. And it fit. Carol called Amelia the next morning. Amelia could hear it in the first 3 words, the careful, gentle, I'm on his side, but I love you too tone. And her stomach dropped, because for 1 full second she saw the whole thing, close ranks around him. She saw the family Thanksgiving table with her on the outside of it, the difficult wife, the one who fell apart, while Tyler sat at the center being patient and good. Amelia, honey, Carol said, Tyler's worried sick about you. He came to me last night. He says you've pulled away from everything, from him, from the street. Is something going on? Because he doesn't even know what he did wrong. Amelia closed her eyes, and then she remembered the thing she had already done. 3 weeks back, before Dave ever called, before any of it, Amelia had texted Carol a photo. She'd done it without a second thought, the way she shared everything in the family album, the way the family shared 100 photos a week. It had been the shot from their shared cloud album, the one Tyler himself had uploaded in May. The restaurant table, the 2 wine glasses, the 2 hands. At the time, Amelia had thought it was a picture of a dinner she and Tyler had had. She'd sent it to Carol with a note. Date night, finally. Carol had hearted it. Cute. Where is this? It had sat in Carol's phone for 3 weeks. Meaningless. A nice picture of her brother's hand and a woman's hand, which Carol had assumed was Amelia's hand. Because of course it was. Carol, Amelia said quietly. Go back to the picture I sent you in May. The restaurant, the two hands. A pause, the sound of a phone being moved. Look at the ring on the woman's hand, Amelia said. Silver, on the index finger. Now look at my hands. I don't own that ring. I've never owned that ring. The silence on the line went on a long time. Amelia did not fill it. She had learned long ago that you let silence do its own work. Oh my God, Carol said, and her voice had come apart. Oh my God, Amelia. He sent it himself. He put it in your... Oh my God. That's Kristen's ring. I've seen that ring. He brought her to Mom's birthday in March. He said she was a client. He said, I know, Amelia said. He sat in my living room last night, Carol said very slowly, and told me you were having a breakdown. Amelia did not say yes. She did not need to. The photograph in Carol's phone had been sitting there for 3 weeks doing nothing, and now it was doing everything, and Amelia had not had to plead a single word. She had handed Tyler's sister the evidence before she even knew it was evidence. And Tyler had taken the photograph himself, proud of his own life, and uploaded it to the shared album like a man who had stopped imagining he could be caught. What do you need? Carol said, the exact words Marion had used. The women always said it the same way. Nothing, Amelia said. I just didn't want you believing the wrong story. The collapse, when it came, was very quiet, and it took all weekend. It started Thursday, with golf. Tyler drove to the course, and Glenn was not there, and neither was Mike Abernathy, and the fourth Ray had texted that morning to cancel without a reason. Tyler stood in the clubhouse parking lot with his clubs over his shoulder and called Glenn, and it went to voicemail. He called Mike. Voicemail. He stood there in the heat with his phone against his ear and the dial tone in it, and lowered it slowly, and looked at the screen and saw nothing. No missed calls, no texts, no group thread lighting up the way it had lit up for 9 years. He drove home with the clubs rattling in the trunk and did not understand. Yet, and the not understanding was its own kind of torture, because some animal part of him had known since Glenn turned away in the driveway, and the rest of him was only now catching up. He came in and found Amelia at the kitchen island with her laptop, calm, working. Glenn blew off golf, he said. Mike, too. Nobody's answering. Did something happen? I don't know, Amelia said, and looked back at her screen. She watched him out of the side of her vision. She watched him stand in the middle of his own kitchen, a big, calm, trustworthy man, regional manager of 9 branches, the only honest man in banking, and she watched the first real fear move through him, not guilt, not yet, but the dawning, sickening arithmetic of a man counting the people who weren't calling back. Friday, he texted Carol about Sunday dinner. We still good for Sunday? Bringing anything? She left it on red. He saw the gray-red 4:11 p.m. and waited. By 9, he called her. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail, and he listened to his own sister's recorded voice telling him to leave a message, and he hung up without leaving one, and then he sat at the bottom of the stairs for a while in the dark. Amelia heard him from the kitchen. She did not go to him. Back Saturday. Kristen's house had a sign in the yard. For sale. A realtor's lockbox on the door by noon. Amelia watched it go up from the window over the sink, and she felt nothing she could name, only the slow settling of something into its correct place. Tyler saw it too. She watched him see it. He stood at that same window with his coffee and went very still, and the coffee tilted in the mug and a little ran over his knuckles, and he didn't seem to feel it. Kristen did not come to say goodbye. Kristen had her own kitchen and her own version, and her own women who had stopped texting back, and her own arithmetic to do. She put a sign in her yard within 3 months of being seen, and she was the first one to leave the street, and she would not be the last. Sunday came, and there was no dinner at Carol's. There was a text. Finally, at noon. 4 words. Don't come. Don't call. Tyler read it standing in the front hall, and Amelia watched his face from the living room. And this was the moment. This was the thing she had waited for, without letting herself name the waiting. She watched him understand. It moved across him slowly, the whole structure of it landing at once. Glenn turning away. The cookout he wasn't asked to. The unread golf text. The dead phone in the parking lot. The calls into voicemail. His sister's living room, where he had gone to be believed. And where he saw it now. She watched him see it. He had not been believed at all. Where Carol had looked at him across her own coffee table, already knowing, already having decided, letting him talk, letting him build his careful, worried husband story, brick by brick in front of a woman who had a photograph of his hand under Kristen's hand, sitting in her phone the entire time. Every warm face of the last weeks rearranged itself in front of him. Eleanor's nod. The Pattersons' careful politeness. The Sunday at Carol's 2 weeks back, where everyone had laughed and passed the bread, and his mother had hugged him at the door. He had thought he was safe inside his life. He understood now, standing in his front hall with 4 words on his phone, that he had been walking through a goodbye for weeks and had mistaken it for belonging. That the people had not been failing to notice. They had been deciding how to let him go. "You told them," he said. His voice had no bottom in it. "All of them. You told them before I even—" He turned and looked at her, and for the first time in 17 years, Amelia saw him with nothing in his hands. No story, no words. The man who was so good at talking, and there was nothing left to say that anyone would stay in the room to hear. She looked back at him, and she was very still, and her stillness was the loudest thing in the house. She did not raise her voice. She did not have to. She had built the street he was standing in. She had threaded herself through every house on it, freely, for years, and he had let himself out the back door, 40 feet from where she slept. And now every door on Dunmore Place had quietly closed, one after another, and she had not slammed a single one. "I didn't tell them anything that wasn't true," she said, and she went back to her laptop and let him stand there in it. Tyler's keys hit the counter at 6:20 on a Friday evening, same as always. Amelia was standing at the kitchen window, looking at the fence line between their yard and Kristen's, and she did not turn around. "Long week," he said. "Yes," she said. She heard him open the refrigerator, heard the glass bottle meet the counter edge, heard him drink. She kept her eyes on the fence. 3 of the pickets on Kristen's side needed repainting. She had noticed them in March and thought about mentioning it at the time. She didn't mention it now either. She ate dinner standing at the counter that night. Not from sadness, or not only from that, but because she had discovered sometime in the last 3 weeks that she preferred it. A bowl of pasta, a glass of water, the window going dark by degrees. Tyler sat at the kitchen island with his phone. The conversation was light and very short. She washed her bowl, set it on the drying rack, and went upstairs without waiting for him. Marion called Saturday morning, early. Amelia sat on the back step with her coffee and talked for 40 minutes. Marion didn't press for decisions or offer opinions on Tyler. She asked whether Amelia was sleeping. Amelia said mostly. Marion said she'd made extra of the sour cream coffee cake and would leave it on the porch, which she did, wrapped in a dish towel Amelia recognized from Marion's kitchen for 12 years. Amelia ate 2 pieces at the counter. She thought that was probably enough coffee cake, and then ate a third. Carol drove down from Westerville on a Saturday 2 weeks later and sat at the kitchen island, the same stool Kristen had sat on with her refinancing documents. Amelia made coffee. Carol wrapped both hands around her mug and looked at the countertop for a moment before she looked up. "He called me again," Carol said. Amelia waited. I let it go to voicemail. Amelia poured her own coffee and didn't say anything. Carol stayed for 3 hours. They talked about Carol's daughter's summer program, about a hydrangea in Carol's front yard that kept dying back, about nothing consequential and all of it consequential. When Carol left, she held Amelia a moment longer than usual in the doorway. Neither of them said anything about Tyler. He was still in the house through most of July. He moved carefully, took up less space, stopped leaving his things on the kitchen counter. His phone stayed face down on every surface. He spoke to Amelia with a specific kind of precision, careful sentences, no wasted words, the way a person speaks when they're aware they're being listened to. One evening, he said he thought they should talk. Amelia said, "Okay." He didn't say anything else. She went upstairs and read for an hour and fell asleep with the lamp still on. By the end of the month, the house had a new quality to its silence. Not hostile, not even sad, exactly. Just exact. Like a room after furniture has been removed, where you can suddenly see the proportions clearly. Tyler left on a Thursday. He took 2 suitcases and a box of files from the study. He said he'd be at a hotel for now. Amelia stood in the kitchen doorway and watched him carry things to his car. She did not help. She did not make it harder. When he backed out of the driveway, she went inside, washed the 2 mugs from the morning, and set them on the drying rack. She opened the kitchen window all the way for the first time in years. The latch had always stuck a little, and she had gotten in the habit of leaving it half open. She pushed it to the frame, and cool air moved through the kitchen and lifted the edge of the dish towel hanging on the oven handle. She stood there a moment and breathed. Across the fence, Kristen's house stayed quiet. Amelia didn't know what had happened there and did not try to find out. She had enough information. She had had enough information for weeks. Dave was pulling tomato cages out of the soft ground next door when Amelia came outside the following Sunday morning. He raised a hand. She raised hers. He went back to his tomatoes. She walked to the far end of her own yard, crouched down, and pulled a handful of creeping clover from between the stones she'd set herself 4 summers ago. The lavender at Eleanor's was doing well. Amelia had checked it Thursday. The border was holding its line exactly 12 inches back from the walk, just as she'd placed it, just as she knew it needed to be. Eleanor had come to the door to wave. Amelia had waved back and kept walking. The block party permit would need someone to file it for next year. She had not decided yet whether that would be her. She thought it probably would be. She knew how to do it, and she knew the people who'd stop her on the sidewalk to ask. She thought she would let it sit until September. And then she would decide. She drove to the nursery on a Tuesday afternoon and bought a flat of creeping thyme for the back path. She loaded it into the car herself and set it on the passenger seat. Driving home along the highway with the windows down, the smell of it filled the car, sharp and clean, that particular green that had no name for it except thyme. She kept one hand on the wheel and let the air move through. Home, she carried the flat inside and set it by the back door. She would plant it in the morning, she decided. She would get up before the heat came and plant it, and it would do what it was meant to do. She went to bed at 10 o'clock with the window open and the curtain moving, and slept straight through until 5.
If you made it this far, you already know why this channel exists. See you tomorrow.